And I ended up at some point shaming myself again because I'm like, Mariena, you're 11, 12 months into being laid off and you can't even tell your friends what it is you do and what value you bring. And that's when I spiraled and I had to like figure out like why that was. And what the hard truth was for me was you don't want to go back into corporate. You don't want to work at a tech company. That was for me the hard truth that I had to uncover was actually you don't want to climb the ladder anymore.
Hey there. Welcome back to the Career Flipper podcast. I'm Jenny Dempsey, your host, a furniture flipper, and someone who's experienced that what the heck am I doing with my life spiral that comes with a career change. This show actually started during one of those exact spirals. I got laid off from my job in customer experience tech world, and I applied to hundreds of other jobs and heard nothing except rejections. So, I did what any logical person would do when they're really, really sad and depressed and feeling like they're not good enough anymore. I saw some furniture on the side of the road that someone was throwing away, and I was like, I feel like that. So I scooped it up, took it home, and learned how to restore it, and was like, if this junky table can have a second chance, maybe I can too. I didn't know exactly how to restore furniture, and I learned along the way. And yeah, if you want to check out my furniture flips, go to Instagram and TikTok and search San Diego Furniture Flipper. But anyways, in between scrubbing grime and sanding wood, I just kept wondering, like, how do other people get through these types of career changes and layoffs and rejections and decide where they're going to go next? Like, how do they get through the messy, this non-linear, am I totally nuts for making a change type stuff? I started asking people. I slid into their LinkedIn DMs, their Instagram DMs, and I found their stories were inspiring. They're full of courage and self-doubt and resilience and imposter syndrome and hope and good times and bad times, and it really proved that starting over doesn't have to be glamorous to be good. Now, every week on this podcast, I talk to regular, everyday people who have totally flipped their careers and their lives. Some have jumped, some got pushed, but all of them figured out how to create something new, something more aligned, something more them. And new episodes drop every week, so be sure to follow or subscribe the podcast on your favorite platform. And if something hits you right in the gut, in a good way I hope, leave a review and tell me about it. Okay, let's talk about today's guest. You are about to meet Mariena Quintanilla, based in Los Angeles, California. She's a career flipper who proves that you can pivot your career, even in the same industry. She spent 2 decades working in tech and flipped her role from things like software engineer to product management to solutions architecture and customer experience. She was even laid off in between as well, but eventually she had this awakening that she didn't want to climb a corporate ladder anymore, but she still wanted to work in tech. So she decided to make a big leap decision and walk away by going the entrepreneurial route. Mariena now runs melonhead.co, an AI education and consulting company. In our chat together, we talk about all this inner work that has to happen before, during, and after taking a leap. Even if you don't want to do the inner work, it's still going to happen. And there's this importance of building a financial safety net, and then still taking a leap even when that net is dwindling. And why being clear on who you are matters more than any job title you'll ever have. And she doesn't sugarcoat the hard parts. She shares the pressures that she felt, the fear of making the wrong choice, like how do you know? And she also talks about what it's taken to rebuild on her own terms. If you've ever felt stuck or unsure, if you're allowed to want to even make a change within the same industry, this episode will really speak to you. Let's get into it now. Mariena, welcome to the Career Flipper. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Oh, this is awesome. Well, I'm just going to let you tell everyone who you are, where you are in the world, and what you're doing now to give a little bit of context before we jump into the career flip goodness. So yeah, take it away.
Yeah, I'm Mariena Quintanilla. I am the CEO and founder of Melonhead, an AI education and services consulting firm. I started my business about a year and a half ago, and I am here in Los Angeles, California. And yeah, just enjoying the blue skies and nice weather while I help companies who aren't sort of with technology at their core actually use generative AI. So.
And everything's about AI right now. There's so many things. And I honestly, I mean, I don't have facts and data. I know it's out there, but AI is kind of coming into a way where people are like, oh, is that going to replace my job? Do I need to be thinking or flipping to something else? So hearing it from you is going to be really interesting of what brought you into this. Like, where did you start your career? How did you flip and pivot and all the things into this new technology that is really changing the game?
I started my career in tech. I studied computer science and worked as a software engineer early in my career. So I've always been in tech. But I've also been someone who's very much about breadth. I've always had lots of friend groups. I was a cheerleader and a football player, right? I was in AP classes and I hung out with skaters in high school. And then I went to college and did like 3 majors because I always love all the things and I love learning. And so it's interesting to see how throughout my 20s and 30s that was reflected in my career, where within a few years, I knew I didn't want to sit at a keyboard and be a programmer all day. And so I moved into product management. And I kind of zigzagged for the next 15 years, doing different things, always trying to get closer to the customer and get closer to roles where I could affect the customer experience and really drive value. And so when I left my last job in tech, I sort of kicking and screaming came into being an entrepreneur. And it was because when I really started thinking about what I wanted to do, it was actually helping democratize technology and getting to a point where I could help people and companies that are not technical at their core actually get value from the innovation that we see in technology. So once I got in tune with that internally, that was sort of my mission, if you will, in life and the purpose that I wanted to really focus on, then it was figuring out how to do that. And it was completely different from anything I'd been doing for the last 17 years.
Wow. Yeah. And to get to that point, I think there's an important piece that I'm hearing is you really went inward to figure out how you wanted to show up, what you wanted to contribute with your career, and also really tap into the things you are someone who loves variety. I love it. You were playing football and you were the cheerleader. I mean, not many people can say that. And it tells me a lot about you and how you probably approach situations. But when you were making these pivots, I want to dive back a little bit, because when you, for example, were you've worked in tech, you've been in this industry, you know it. But when you move from role to role, for example, programming to product in the product sphere, I mean, how did you start getting into roles like that when you may not have had that experience? I think a lot of people find themselves in situations where I want to do this. It's in my same industry. I want to flip to this, but I've never done that. They're not going to hire me. I can't start on the ground floor. So what was that like for you? How did you kind of my way into those things?
Yeah. Because I like to kind of describe my career as I've been making a number of smaller pivots throughout, my career. And this is now a much bigger one that I've done more recently. But those smaller pivots I was able to do because I sort of adjusted one axis, if you will, at a time. And so when I was an engineering manager, I was working on an internal team. We didn't have a product manager. And so I had to do a lot of the things that would traditionally fall under those responsibilities, like prioritizing, managing the backlog, thinking about the vision of the products we were developing. So I was able to pitch myself that I'd already been doing those things, even though I didn't have the formal title. And so that was really the way I did it. Is I spent time thinking about how I could frame the work I'd been doing, even though I didn't have a title. And then I had to, pitch myself. Interestingly enough, it was also some luck, right? Because at that time, I'd been an engineer, I'd been working on data in this time in the early 2000s. Data was brand new. There weren't a lot of people that could speak and have that fluency with how to work with data. The term data engineering hadn't been coined yet. And so they were looking for people that could speak that. And so it was also a good, healthy blend of like I had skills that were in demand. And then I was able to kind of sell and pitch myself, even though I didn't have some of the other skills, I could sell myself that I could pick those up. But I do want to put that sort of disclaimer because depending on where people are trying to go, there might be headwinds, there might be tailwinds. And so sometimes it's going to be hard and sometimes it's going to be easy. And you have to, I think, take all that into account.
Yeah, that is a really good point. And I kind of like how, you were like your resume, I would imagine, was so detailed to the point where you were really highlighting these skills as opposed to it being so specific to the job itself. Like you didn't have that particular title that you wanted to move into, but you did X, Y, and Z, and being very clear and detailed about that. It sounds like that's what really helped you. Did you work with someone to help you kind of figure that out? Because I feel like sometimes that may not come so naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you figure that part out?
I had a lot of people that had the job I wanted to have that were in my like network at work, that this is in my 20s. So the people I was going out drinking with, for instance, after work.
Yeah.
And so I was able to talk to them a lot about like, what do they do, and get their input, for instance. And so, they were the ones who kind of were my informal coaches on here's how to position yourself. They were also older than me. And so they were, 5 to 10 years older than me. And I think that really helped me too, because they also had been in the position of the hiring manager. And so they could help give me that perspective. So I think things like that, whether it's more formal and just having someone review your resume, or it's having discussions with people informally. There's lots of ways you can get input to help you put together a plan.
Yeah. And you touched on something that shows up a lot in career flipper interviews where it's like you see someone who's doing something you want to do. And you talk to them. And I think that like that is just such a crucial component. I'm like, it doesn't matter if you like awkwardly slide into someone's DMs or whatever it is, like just ask. Like there's the least they could just ignore you. They could say no, but whatever. You put yourself out there to ask. And from your experience, it sounds like that helped you. You saw people in hiring manager roles. You were picking their brains. Like you were using your network, your connections, and also having some cheers and great times. Like it sounds like it was good across the board, but that's such a big piece.
What's interesting though is I only ended up doing that for a few years. I think I spent 4 years in product management, and then I was kind of like, I could see the career ladder and where it was going. And I was like, oh, actually, this isn't what I want to spend the rest of my life doing. And that was really interesting for me, because I realized that to some degree, you only dream based on what you know. And so because when I was an engineer, I was interacting with product managers and I hadn't known what product management was. I was like, oh, that looks like something I'd enjoy, that I'd be good at. I'm going to go do that. And I did it for a few years and I realized actually, I missed this or that. And I realized that wasn't what I wanted. And then from there, I pivoted into solutions architecture, which was an interesting pivot because even when I moved into it, I remember telling them when I was interviewing for this, I was like, I don't know what this is and what you want me to do really, but these are the skills I have. These are the strengths I have. And we just it was a startup. And so it was like, no, we think you're going to be great. And they were willing to kind of take a bet on me. But that then role was a pivot, and it helped me get exposure to the sales process, to working directly with customers on the front lines, on onboarding and all these different things. And I was still using a lot of my technical skills and product management prioritization for solutions architecture. But that was like an interesting experience, because then again, it opened me up to all different types of working in a technology company, and I had been with an ad tech. And so that was interesting to sort of widen the breadth of the different roles that I knew of and what I saw as sort of possible, and where maybe my skills would be best used and where I would be, I guess, happiest.
Yeah. the fact that like the focusing on the skills part is just so important because they can be translated into other areas. Like you're taking on roles.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know what a solutions architect is. I hear that. I'm like, that sounds like very technical, but like, I honestly have no idea. And so, but hearing that the skills that you used, and I'm super curious, this is kind of a random question, but I love asking the random ones. So how long did you do the engineering manager position? Like, how long were you in that? Was that a few years, a couple years? What was that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I really spent 3 to 4 years sort of in each role. So I was 3 years as a IC software engineer, 3 years as an engineering manager, and then I spent 4 years in product management. And then I ended up spending, well, maybe it was 4 to 5 years though, working in kind of these sales engineering, support engineering, solutions architecture type roles.
Yeah, and the reason that I call that out is because I feel like I hear this often from people like us who do these variety of things. There's some type of internal time frame. There's like we we're like, okay, and we don't intentionally plan it, but we start to feel this like, I don't know. Me, sometimes it's just like I get really restless or a little, maybe there's more anxiety coming up, or there's a feeling in my gut that I'm just like, I just need to change. But then I'm like, wait, why? What's going on? Oh, it's been like a few years. Okay, that's why I need to go do this. And so hearing you say that really resonated because I think a lot of people feel that pull. I don't know the answer. I don't know why, but I think we kind of have this internal time frame of how much we can take before we realize that our calling, our purpose, whatever it is, can also be applied to something else. Like there could be multiple of these in a life. And hearing you kind of bounce around this like 3 to 5 year mark,
Yeah.
it stands out.
Well, and I've had to ask myself a few times, and I'm like, do I just want to change because I don't want to do the same thing forever?
Yeah.
And I have recognized that, yeah, you know what, that shows up throughout my life, in my personal life and in my professional life. And so I have sought out roles where I can have a lot of new experiences, where I can continue to learn, where the role can sort of change over time. So most recently in corporate, at least, I've been in these post-sales technical leadership roles where sometimes I'm thinking like an engineer and I'm working with the engineering team. Sometimes I'm working with product teams. Sometimes I'm working with customer success or with sales or legal or compliance. And it's the first sort of group of roles where I actually was able to go, I think, really for more than a few years because of the fact that I was able to sort of tap into so many different things that it could keep my brain engaged and I wasn't getting bored.
Right. Not getting bored. There was the variety there that kept you in it. And so, okay, you're in this product marketing role. It's been about 4 years. And then what do you do next?
Well, so that was the one where after I got laid off, I had been a head of product and I knew I didn't want to make my career product management. And so I started talking to people in my network and was just sort of having informal conversations. I was not actively looking too closely for a job because I actually had gotten an offer already for a product management role. And that's when I kind of had to have that moment with myself where I said, do I take this offer? But I felt kind of internally like I was not excited. I was kind of like, oh, I don't know. And I had to say, you know what, I'm going to turn this down, even though I have nothing else in the pipeline, nor do I even you know what I mean? It was a really hard decision to make. But ultimately I decided, you know what, I'm going to say no to this and I'm going to take a few months to reflect a little more internally about what I want. And then a couple months later, I was having a conversation with a former coworker and I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And I flat out actually told him that. And I said, look, this is what I've been doing since we worked together, because it had probably been 5 years since we'd worked together. So I talked about some of my strengths and what I've been working on. And I said, look, he said, actually, I don't have any product management roles. And I said, that's great. I don't want to do product management.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure what I want to do next, but I know I know these are my strengths. I know I want to do something else. And he was someone who had worked with me in a leadership role. He was higher than me. And so he knew my strengths and he was able to say, we have this other role and I think your strengths would be good on that. So I think that's where you have to look for people and within your network, don't just keep in touch with your peers and colleagues that maybe you're gossiping with or that you genuinely
Yeah.
like and want to have a drink with, but you also want to keep in touch with the leaders, not just your former managers, but the people diagonal to you, because this was someone who was not even in my department or org, but I had worked with his team. And so he knew I had done good work when I worked with his team.
Mhm.
And he was the one who ended up introducing me to this other role that they were hiring for that he felt my skills would be useful for. That was solutions architecture. And that was the one where I was like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
But based on my background, everyone who was on the interview panel was like, you have the skills for this. And it translates. And yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, gosh. So many things are popping in my mind here. First thing, you mentioned the word layoff. And so I want to tap into that for a second because I know a lot of people listening to the show are in similar situations where they may have gotten laid off. And one of the things that stood out to me about what you said, which resonates with me because I also had a similar thing where you may have a job offer come up. And I know for me, I was like, even if I didn't want to do it, I felt like I had to say yes because what else am I going to do? Other people are like, oh, Jenny doesn't have anything coming in her bank account. Like she's picking up furniture on the side of the road and fixing up. She probably should take any job that she gets right now. And I went in with that mentality and then those things didn't work out. And so I just think I knew intuitively it was not right, but I didn't feel like I had a choice. Hearing what you said, I love this because this is so important because sometimes we can tap into that awareness or intuition or whatever it is that it's like, okay, this is not the right fit for me. And it's okay to say no, even if I have nothing else lined up because there's something else out there. And it sounds like you kind of maybe had that feeling. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more, how do you know when it's okay to say no after a layoff when you're dealing with the grief of the layoff? Obviously, there's a lot of emotions that affect you personally, professionally, but when you got nothing else, how do you know when it's okay to say no to an opportunity because something else better might be ahead?
Yeah. Well, I think there's two things. First, I want to say that I am a planner and for all scenarios.
Yes.
I've got my earthquake kit at home for when there's an earthquake. In one of my layoffs most recently, I planned for, because the tech scene has been very difficult. I'm like, if we need to, we can move in with my parents and rent the house. I'm always planning. But so when I've had jobs, what that meant is I've always been very intentional about keeping a 6-month savings account because I don't want to be forced into the wrong job, because I know once you have a job, you kind of need to keep it for a year or two. So I will say that is a part of it for me, is that I have intentionally saved so that I'm not forced into a decision out of financial necessity. Mm-hmm. I know not everyone's there at the moment, so I'll recognize that. But that's at least been it for me. That's part of what gave me that flexibility. But the second piece is the mindset. And I think having an abundance mindset, not a scarcity mindset. And it's having confidence that I have skills, that my skills are marketable, and that they are valued in the market. And I think that helped me a lot. I've been laid off 3 times. I've myself been a part of 12 layoffs that I've, as a manager, had to orchestrate. And so for me, my 20 years in tech, layoffs has just been, it's been a natural part of it. And I've always seen the tech cycle of boom and hiring heavily, almost really often over hiring, and then cutting back. And I think because of my exposure to that cycle as a director and as a manager, I've always been like, this can be my reality. Even when I haven't been laid off, my husband's been laid off. So that savings account has always been a part of our strategy so that we're not forced into accepting jobs we don't want.
Yeah, that's very smart. It's very much this calculated risk in a way where you are taking that ownership of hey, this is what we need no matter what. And then it gives you the freedom and flexibility to make choices that are more aligned with who you are and to give things a try. And I think that is so important. And then also just believing in yourself, believing in your skills, knowing that, sure, maybe these companies didn't want you, but you are still a valid, wonderful human with great skills and great experiences that you can now put towards roles you didn't even know existed, like solutions architects.
It's not an easy thing to do. And most recently, like when I walked away that first time, the market was in my favor. I was an asset, right? Yeah. I had been headhunted in the past in my career. I think I had things going in my favor. So I think for me to have the mindset of abundance was a little bit easier. It was still very scary because I didn't have anything in the pipeline. I didn't even know what I wanted. But most recently, it was much harder to say no when I had an offer coming in because right at that point, this was early 2024, there's like hundreds of applicants competing for jobs. So many people have been out of work in the tech industry. And when I walked away from that one, that was much harder because I wasn't getting phone calls. Even people in my network, if they were hiring, they were being bombarded. So it's definitely not always easy.
Yeah, no, and I hear that completely. I had 18 years in the tech startup world, customer experience. And honestly, it was the same. I thought when I got laid off, I was kind of like, I too was headhunted in the past. I had, a great network of people. Most of my jobs throughout my career were all referrals. Like I just had no concern. And then 403 job rejections later, I was like, what in the F? Like I was like, suddenly I am not a valuable asset anymore. And it was like a shift in my identity. I had to and it took me 2 years to get something else. In the meantime, leaning into my entrepreneurial spirit, which I want to pick your brain on that as well. Yeah. But also that ability to get resourceful, figure it out, still got to pay the bills, but do things that really light me up. And that led to this podcast. It led to furniture. And then 2 years later, the 404th job I applied for was a yes. And it was definitely a referral. And it just kind of was like, what a journey. But the thing is that I did not believe in myself. I did not have very high, self-worth wise. Yes, I believe I'm a great person, but I just thought if I can't get a job, who am I? I thought work was all I was good at. It's how I defined my purpose. And so without that, I feel so great. And this sounds nuts, but to be having $0 coming in my bank account, pulling furniture out of the trash, fixing it up and selling it so I have cash, has taught me that, yes, I am resourceful and my skills are still here. And I don't necessarily need a, fancy corporate title to prove my worth to the world, that there are other ways I can do that. And I just had to learn that lesson that way. And rough. Yeah.
I was on the opposite end where I never once questioned my skills and my value. It was almost like, and for that I'm grateful for. I had a mental breakdown 1.5 years prior to getting laid off where I had been shaming myself for not doing the work I needed to get my VP title because I could see the work I needed to do. I knew what I needed to do, and I couldn't do it because it would have required me to sacrifice more than I was willing to sacrifice in my personal life. Yeah. And so I had to let go a lot of certain parts of my identity, and I had to reevaluate. I call myself a recovering overachiever for this reason.
I love it.
Because I got to a point where I realized, actually, this is not good for my health. It's not good for my relationships. And so...
Okay, real quick, can we talk about a product that is helping to keep the podcast going? Okay, good. So if you got any wood furniture at home that's looking, let's say, a little rough around the edges, maybe there are some scratches, maybe the wood just looks really dry, it's just looking a little meh. You don't got to go all full furniture flipper mode to flip it and give it some love. Honestly, just grab a soft towel and a jar of Arlington Woodworks Furniture Balm. This stuff is actually magic. It rehydrates the wood, it softens up the dings and scratches, and it keeps it all protected for many more years to come. It's non-toxic, it smells like fresh oranges, and one jar will last for multiple pieces of furniture in your home. You'll just like be wandering around your house looking for more furniture to add the wood balm to. And what's even cooler is that it's made in small batches by a Navy veteran and his wife who actually flipped their own careers to start the business. I mean, support a career flipper. That's what we do, right? They've also given listeners of the Career Flipper a little treat. 10% off your order. Just go to arlington-woodworks.com and use code FLIPPER at checkout. Once again, that's arlington-woodworks.com and use code FLIPPER at checkout for 10% off. Okay, let's get back to the show.
For me, I had realized I am only now going to achieve within the boundaries and guardrails of what I'm looking for. And so when I finally got laid off, it was, no, I know a lot of the value I bring, but wow, this market is such that there's a lot of other people that have these same skills, which I told you with the data stuff, early on, that was my edge a lot of times is I am technical and I can speak the business and I can speak to customers, and that trifecta is really unique. And then in this market, I learned, oh no, there's a lot of other people that can do that too. Yeah. And so I had to say, okay, I had to almost approach my personal career like a business, where I said, well, then what can I do that is competitive, or how can I position myself? And really, I think, figure out like, what do I want to do, and where can I find an intersection with what I care about and what I want to do with my skills and with where there is market demand. Because what I had previously found to be unique about me and in demand was, in fact, in the current market, not unique.
Right. And this kind of reevaluation of all of that tied to all of the emotional, mental, these things that are like, it's a whole journey. It's a whole mess of a thing.
It took a year. It took a year. And in that end of the 12 months after I was laid off most recently, I had a whole breakdown with tears and a big fight with my husband, and, everything blew up. Yeah. So it's not easy, and it's not a straight line.
No, it is very squiggly and all over the place, and like it's a legit roller coaster. It is absolutely fun at times, but also terrifying at sometimes. And it is just something that if we talk about more, maybe, I don't know, it's not going to help make it any easier, but I think it just kind of normalizes it. Like, yeah, it's
Absolutely.
part of this. You can still do these things. You don't have to stay stuck.
Yeah.
But just know that it's probably going to be this way. But I also feel like sometimes if you stay put, you're still going to run into this. So you're still going to find things are going to come up and challenge you. And either way, but now I want to talk about the entrepreneurial part, because you then left and you're starting your own thing. So how did all of that happen? Where did that come from?
Yeah. So in my first year being laid off, it was sort of my season of trying new things, of like you mentioned, right? Being resourceful. I tried consulting, and I felt like, I think I tried it with kind of one foot in and one foot out, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I didn't make a lot of progress, but it was also about sort of gathering data, if you will, and seeing, to my point earlier about looking for signals from the market for where there was value and need. And I thought, for me, it was like helping customers with technical onboarding and scaling their customer onboarding. I didn't get a single lead for that. And so then I went back to looking for a job full-time in corporate. And I started to realize then, as I was interviewing, it was like I could feel it in my chest that I was like, you know what? I don't really want to go back to corporate America. And it was very strange for me, because I had never wanted to be an entrepreneur, that I was never one of those people. I had always aspired to climb the corporate ladder, to get to the C-suite. I'd always been very ambitious in that way. And so this was a very new feeling to me. Mm-hmm. And I had to then, again, like a few years back, I had to start digging a little bit, getting more self-awareness then about, well, if that's not what I'm doing, what am I doing, and what value do they bring? And that's where then my identity started to fall apart, if you will. And I did recognize I needed to shift my identity, but that was probably the hardest part, because if I'm not a director of customer solutions engineering. What am I if I'm not helping,
Mm-hmm.
SaaS companies with like these customer integrations, these very hairy sort of technical things, but customer facing, like what am I doing? And I think that was the first piece, was letting go of that identity and being willing to say, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then to start kind of doing the journaling and the mindset work and just, that digging to figure out what I would do next. And ultimately, it led to me first deciding on a mission and then realizing it was going to be consulting again. But this time I was doing it with both feet in, and it was completely different. It was focused on education. And so for me, it was pivoting to instructional design and to facilitation. And these were things like I'd never been trained in. And so it's almost the opposite of everything we've talked about, where I didn't necessarily have those hard skills, I should say, on how to do some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
I'd always trained and focused on education and upskilling as a manager in my like 15 plus years as a people manager, but I'd never been a part of learning development, within an organization, or sort of done those things naturally. So it was, that was a much bigger leap and a bigger flip.
Yeah, that's huge. Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're changing so many elements of your life, personally, professionally, digging into things you're just like, yeah, I've never done this. But going in a direction you never saw yourself going.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious, Mariena, did you work with a coach, or did you read books or listen? Like, how did you figure out like the importance of writing a mission? How did you even write that? How did you know what to journal about? Like, did you work with someone during that time, or what resources did you use that were really helpful?
Not at the moment, but I have in the past. So I spent 3 years with an executive coach years ago when I was very focused on getting to the VP level.
Yeah.
And so I had some of the frameworks available to me that I had used when I worked with her. And I pulled those back. I went back to my Google Drive search for them because I remembered how helpful they had been. And I found those. So I highly recommend people working with coaches.
Yeah.
I had just prior, like in the period where everything was falling apart, I had been working with an executive presence coach, more specifically on my speaking and how I show up, because at that point I was focused on my first iteration with consulting, as well as how I talk to my network about what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And if anything, that is what probably accelerated my like spiral, because it forced me to confront things, right? And she would be pushing me to talk about certain things or things like that, that really helped me confront, if you will, those sort of hard truths.
Yeah, that can get messy. What do you mind sharing? What's like one of the hard truths that you learned the most from sharing?
Well, so, and I don't know if hard truth is the right word then, but I think for me, when I sort of do the replay in my head, the question that caused my downfall was, trying to talk to people about the value I bring. What value can you bring in an organization? Which, wow, how capitalist does that sound? But I think most of my career, it was very easy for me to talk about, this is what I do to people in my network, because there are people all around you that want to help you, but they need to know what your strengths are, so that they can pull you into things at the right time. And for whatever reason, it was like I couldn't talk, and I couldn't, like, the words weren't coming. And it was fascinating to me because I could almost, as a bystander, see myself, and I'm like, why can't you articulate this? And I knew how it wasn't from a place of, what is it when you don't believe in yourself? Imposters. It was not from a place of imposter syndrome. It was very odd to me to see that I knew I had value, and I knew I had skills, and I had them written in a Notion document or Google Docs and in my resume. But for whatever reason, I couldn't articulate them. And so she was trying to work with me on putting together my pitch. And I had 10 variations of it, but none of them felt right. And it was like in a conversation, I could never authentically communicate them. It was like my energy was like mismatched with the words I had on paper. And that's why I think a lot of my interviews, it was like I was saying things, but my energy wasn't in partnership with them. And so I wouldn't move farther in the interview. And I ended up at some point shaming myself again because I'm like, Mariena, you're 11, 12 months into being laid off and you can't even tell your friends what it is you do and what value you bring. And that's when I spiraled and I had to like figure out like why that was. And what the hard truth was for me was you don't want to go back into corporate. You don't want to work at a tech company. That was for me the hard truth that I had to uncover was actually you don't want to climb the ladder anymore. And I was like, well, if that's not what I'm doing, what am I doing? And I'd been the breadwinner in my family. I've
Wow.
always been like the one bringing home the bacon, and that is something I took pride in, is being the one that was flying across the country and all the
Yeah.
things that come with being that.
Yeah.
So that was the thing I had to then really unpeel in terms of identity.
Yeah. Ooh, gosh. I mean, that is crunchy. That's just like one of these things that it's like, I mean, hearing you share that story, that spiral sounds like one of the best and most necessary things that happened to you at this point. Like you were at the point where it was the right moment for that spiral to happen, for you to have these, kind of awakening in a way, like to bring you to this next chapter in, in your
Yeah.
career. And it's just like, but to have to face that when you're in it is just so like, it's just like you're carrying bricks on your shoulders. You're just constantly like, oh my gosh, every effort feels so hard because when
Yeah.
you have that realization that everything in your career had been, about climbing the ladder, had been about, how this defined, whatever, and your skills and all these things that made you, and how you defined yourself, to suddenly unravel that and be like, yeah, I don't want to go back to corporate. I don't want to climb the ladder. Then what
Nor
does
could I
that
fake it.
mean?
I think
Yeah.
the other thing that was interesting to me was it was not just admitting myself that I didn't want that anymore, but it was admitting to myself that I wasn't willing to sort of fake it and live in that, like work in that, like the code switching piece of
Mm-hmm.
working in corporate. I
Mm-hmm.
was just no longer willing to change who I was. And it was interesting because it isn't a problem for my husband. It's not a problem for many people. They just is like, it's almost like the ability to compartmentalize. And for whatever reason, I just realized I don't want to compartmentalize anymore.
Wow. That's huge. That's a huge realization. And so you have this, self-awareness now, and you then start doing your next thing. And so it sounds like you had 2 feet into this
Yeah.
consulting.
Yeah.
And then what happened next?
Yeah, I mean, once I sort of that veil lifted and I went both feet in, it was like the stars aligned. It was magical. And it's fascinating to look back and just see how things fell into place. And the customers came like just like a year before, I sent out an email to people in my network, including, by the way, people I did not work with. I also included people I went to the gym with, neighbors. Like, I think that's important for people if you're starting something new. Don't just limit yourself to people, you've worked with. But I told people this is what I've been doing. I had started workshops for local moms to teach them how to use generative AI, ChatGPT, and the like. But I wanted to move into bigger deals and to be doing education at the enterprise level. I wanted to build custom solutions for people using generative AI. And so I told people what I've been up to. I said, I'm looking for a guinea pig. And sure enough, I ended up getting this amazing referral, closed a 6-figure deal within 27 days, which to
Yes.
me was just the greatest thing to be able to see you can do this. And it was like the world wanted me to see and send me a message. This is possible. You can make this a full-time job. You can build a business from scratch. You can do this.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible validation that you are on the right path. After
Exactly.
everything you had
Yeah.
been through, having, those really low points where you're just like, yeah, I don't know. And moving into this new direction where it's kind of just like it showed up, handed you on a silver platter in a way where obviously lots and lots of work, but it found you at the right time when you were fully open and able to accept it and
Yeah.
do it. Like it was
Yeah.
the right time.
Yeah.
So you have this opportunity, it shows up, you take it, and then what's the next step here?
Yeah, I mean, so now, the in the year since, it's really been about building out a brand new business. And so it's figuring out like what services I'm offering. I've already done two pivots. I'm still, my mission is the same, but it's, am I positioning myself for customer experience, which is what I started with, because my background has been very much in
Mm-hmm.
bringing technical solutions to customers. So that I can speak a lot to that function in a business. I
Mm-hmm.
ended up finding that wasn't necessarily working and I wasn't getting a lot of leads that way. But I was getting leads working internally with IT, with HR that want to bring, AI into their organizations and they don't necessarily, they're not subject matter experts. So that's now what I'm focusing on. Custom development was my very first deal. It was a huge deal, but I found it didn't help me get close enough to the mission I want to focus on. And I was almost trying to do too many services and be like a one-stop shop for these services. And I think for a small consultancy, it just diluted things a little too much. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm doubling down on education and focusing really exclusively on that. So yeah, the last year has been almost trying different things, figuring out messaging, where am I getting leads, what do I hear from potential clients, so that now I can, adjust how I grow my business and where I focus my services, and figuring out when I hopefully start to bring in more people.
Yes, I love that. And your journey is just, I don't know, it really resonates because I think a lot of people feel they don't want to flip to something that's completely outside of the industry. They want to just change, within the industry or build their own thing within something that they've been working in. And you are the proof that it is possible and that you can work in tech and you can have multiple different pivots along the way,
Oh yeah.
including starting your own thing. And I have learned a lot about you and your story and the ways that you have made these decisions today. And I just am curious, is there any last piece of advice to someone who might be sitting at their desk right now at their corporate job that is just like, ugh, I wish I could do that, but I'm scared or whatever it is. Do you have any last pieces of advice for someone to help them make these decisions for themselves?
I think doing the inner work is important to prioritize. I think once you start down that path, you'll very quickly realize if corporate isn't what you want to do, that you will need to reconcile those two things, and it'll force you to make that jump because you'll feel like you're doing something you're not supposed to do. Depending on your personality, like for some people, that might mean that they're putting together a plan, they're saving, and then they pick a date. I've seen many people I know that that's what they did. They saved and they planned almost like the squirrels, right? And then they had their date, and you respect that date with yourself because that's a commitment you're making to bet on yourself. For other people, the path looks a little bit different. Maybe like me, it's yeah. But the funny part actually is that moment when I started my business was actually in some ways the scariest because I had been unemployed for a year, and in that year we had fully drained that savings account.
Ooh.
So the point at which I decided to start my business was when we actually no longer had the safety net.
Oh, look
And
at
so in some
you.
ways, that's where, you really do have to go both feet in. And maybe that's the other step of my advice is go with it both feet in. Things will line up if you believe in yourself and if you're going for it. But if you're just towing the water,
Mhm.
you're probably not going to get very far.
Yeah. Yeah. True that. True that. You're proof that going 2 feet in was absolutely worth it. And you didn't have the net. You're like, all
A
right,
little bit of
this is
delusion.
how
Yeah,
much
a little bit of
money.
delusion.
Yeah. That can help. I know that definitely helps to just sometimes, all right, here we are. This is what we're doing.
Yeah. And what that meant tactically was I wasn't applying to jobs anymore. I wasn't looking at the job openings. If someone reached out to me about a job or something they thought I would be good for, I said no, thank you, because my mindset, all of my mental energy, everything was 100% focused on this is what I'm doing. And I'm going to do this for, I don't know, 2 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And I at least knew the amount of money I needed to survive. Like survival mode was actually a very small amount of revenue that I could bring in and we would be fine, or we could rack up credit card debt for a few years. So that I think
Right.
helped me, like I had my plan,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. The plan. Absolutely. The planner does not ever not have a plan. Like, because as a
Yeah.
planner myself, I feel that as well. But
Yes.
Mariena, thank you so much for sharing your journey and putting up with all my questions. How can people find you and connect with you and slide into your DMs and ask you questions about what they may be navigating? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, I think professionally, like LinkedIn is the best place. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, so find me there. You can also go to my website, melonhead.co. That's with two L's, like Carnegie Mellon, my alma mater. Shout out to Carnegie Mellon. So melonhead.co also has my contact info and any events that I'm speaking at, things like that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mariena. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Jenny. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Career Flipper podcast. You can connect with Mariena using the links in the show notes. And hey, if you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps other career flippers find the show. And let's be real, figuring out this career stuff is way easier when you know you're not the only one winging it. If you have your own career flip story to share, hop over to thecareerflipper.com and drop it in the form. I would love to hear it, and maybe you can be on a future episode with me. If you ever want someone to talk about this stuff for an event, or you just want to do a team building chat about career changes or one-on-one coaching, I do that. And I would love to talk with you more. Reach out to me, hello@thecareerflipper.com. On a personal note, what I love most about this podcast is just knowing that the chance that someone out there might hear these stories and think, okay, maybe I can take that first step. Maybe I can. It's scary, but it's also where everything begins. It's messy, but it's necessary. So keep going, my friend. What's the best that could happen?